are probably the most interesting duo in NBA history to study, mainly because of how polarizing their relationship was. You had perhaps the most dominant player ever in Shaq, who physically had no equal, and what many people consider to be the closest player we've had to MJ with Kobe Bryant. What we were able to witness with these two in the same uniform still hasn't been duplicated to this day, and maybe it never will be. It's just a shame their run ended prematurely when it became clear the two couldn't coexist. The duo's demise ended up being a bitter one, and if you want to know more about their split, you can watch the video I made on that because it's a personal favorite of mine. Anyways, their split basically created two sides, people who liked Kobe and people who didn't like Kobe. 13 years later, and we're left with a lot of narrative surrounding these two, and a heavy favorite for people who don't like Kobe is to say that he got carried for 3 championships. And today, I'm finally taking on the challenge of showing why that's probably the most ridiculous thing that people are still saying. What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and you would think this statement isn't meant to be taken seriously because people say a lot of things when they're biased or just outright dislike a player. But the notion that Kobe was carried by Shaq is a crazy one that seemed to stick over the years, and I can't quite figure out why. Regardless of the countless records and facts that prove this theory wrong, people insist on discrediting Kobe's accomplishments by saying he only has most of them because of Shaq. Well, first of all, if you've taken any time at all to study Kobe's approach to basketball, you know this is downright crazy to begin with. But since him being carried is such a popular opinion, I figured I'd just lay out all the facts in one place so people can find them. First off, let's just start in order. Now, this isn't to tear down Shaq, but I feel like it's important to mention that he played 4 seasons in the NBA before he and Kobe were even teammates. Of course, those were in Orlando. Kobe really didn't become Kobe as we know him until the 2000 season, so there was a 7-year period in Shaq's career where he had time to do things his way without Kobe Bryant being a star. In those 7 seasons, Shaq had a whopping total of 1 finals appearance in which he was completely owned by Hakeem Olajuwon and swept. And in the 3 seasons with the Lakers before Kobe really became a force, they never made it further than being swept by the Utah Jazz in the conference finals. But again, I'd like to reiterate, I'm not tearing Shaq down, I'm quite literally just stating what's on record of happening before the Kobe and Shaq era, and we really don't need to spend any more time here. Let's go to the year 2000 where Kobe truly started to emerge into what we came to know him as. I want to start it out by saying this is the only season I would even consider having a conversation with you about if you're telling me that Kobe was carried. This is probably Shaq's career best effort. Phil Jackson pushed him to have an MVP season, his stats all across the board are just out of this world, and when you look at the playoffs for that year and how many 40-point efforts he had, yeah, it starts to look like Shaq might have done this one by himself, and that's until you look just a little bit deeper. First off, I've just got to point out that nobody who averages 21 points a game in a playoff run gets carried anywhere. That's pretty crazy. But also, you've got to remember that there were key moments where Kobe Bryant almost single-handedly saved the day for the Lakers in that playoff run. You can go back and watch my video about 10 of Kobe Bryant's greatest playoff moments because 2 of those were in the 2000 playoffs. Against the Blazers, not only was Shaq in foul trouble, but he was producing well below his usual output as he only pitched in 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 turnovers. The Lakers trailed by 15 in the 4th quarter of a Game 7 on the brink of elimination when Kobe Bryant decided it wasn't time to go home just yet. He would lead the comeback and finish the game with a near triple-double at 25 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 blocks, and one of the most famous highlights of the Kobe and Shaq era made just for the people who love to call him selfish. A good thing to remember here is that Shaq was going through much of the same thing LeBron went through as far as criticism with not being able to win a championship. Without Kobe's efforts in that game, Shaq goes home for another summer ringless after such a dominant season, and he would have gotten killed for his poor play in Game 7. Remind me how Shaq carried Kobe in this moment, please. Kobe's next shining moment came shortly after this in Game 4 of the NBA Finals against the Pacers. I actually love this moment because when people are biased against Kobe, their favorite thing to do is post his finals averages next to Shaq's for that series, and yeah, there's an enormous difference, except for the fact that they kinda leave out the part where Jalen Rose purposely injures Kobe Bryant in Game 2 of that series by sticking his foot under him, causing him to miss all but 9 minutes of that game and all of Game 3. And no, I'm not making that up, I'll link you to the description of the video where Jalen Rose flat out admits that he did that on purpose. So you'd think that would be brought up when people make mention of his poor finals average that year, or at least when they see that he again put on the heroics when Shaq fouled out of Game 4, but nope, that's nowhere to be found. The Lakers were up 2-1 in that game in Indiana where the Pacers had a great chance to tie the series. Shaq was his regular dominant self, except that he fouled out and the game ended up going into overtime. But boy, it sure is a good thing that Kobe has a high pain tolerance and was able to perform on what he described as a throbbing ankle. He was able to play 47 out of 53 possible minutes in that game, scoring 28 points, 5 assists, 52% from the field, and a total takeover in overtime to send the Lakers to a narrow 2-point victory. I have to remind you here that this is when the NBA Finals was in a 2-3-2 format, so if the Lakers lost that game and the series was tied, they had to play Game 5 in Indiana as well, which they ended up losing in a blowout. Kobe's heroics in that game was a big difference in the Lakers being up or down 3-2 by the time they returned to LA. So when you tell me Kobe was carried, yet he saved the Lakers twice in one playoff run, I tend to look at you a bit crazy. Players that are carried don't regularly end up close to or just flat out being the most important player of a game. But now we get to move to my favorite part. Like I said, I'll at least have a debate with you about the 2000 season, but look at 2001 please. First off, in the regular season, Kobe averaged 28.5 points a game, nearly 6 rebounds, and 5 assists while shooting 46.4% from the field. Not only are those insane averages, but his scoring average was literally 0.2 of a point less than Shaq's. But never mind that. In what world is a player averaging almost 30 points a game getting carried? Not to mention he was leading the Lakers in assists and steals that season. In the 2001 playoffs, where the Lakers still hold the greatest record of all time at 15-1, he upped those averages to 29.4 points a game, 6.1 assists, and 7.3 rebounds, where he'd become the second best rebounder on that team even though they still had Horace Grant. Is that not enough for you? Well, this is also where Kobe turned in some of his best individual performances in the playoffs as well, where he dropped 48 points on the Kings to complete that sweep and 45 on the Spurs in Game 1, so yeah, back-to-back 40-point games in the playoffs. When you put his numbers next to Shaq in the picture that Kobe actually posted on his Instagram, it becomes fairly obvious that this playoff run was a 1A, 1B situation. You can't even look at this picture with a straight face and pretend that this is what getting carried looks like, but I know this isn't enough because it never is. In 2002, the Lakers were again on the brink of being eliminated in Game 7, and this time it was against the Kings. The difference here is that Kobe and Shaq did what a lot of people simply don't give this duo enough credit for doing. They worked together. Shaq was his usual dominant self with a 35-point double-double, and Kobe finished the game only 3 assists shy of a 30-point triple-double to help the Lakers advance to their third straight NBA Finals. There was no carrying going on in this scenario whatsoever. It was just the 1A, 1B situation that made this duo so dominant in the first place. And then there's the 2002 NBA Finals against the Nets. Check this out. Shaq would take home his third straight NBA Finals MVP trophy, which is pretty much the icing on the cake for people who say he carried Kobe Bryant. But what about Kobe Bryant? His averages in that series displayed on your screen were good enough to win Finals MVP in any final series. There's no way you can deny that. However, per usual, the 7-foot, 300-pound plus superhero had better numbers for the same reason he always had better numbers. He had no physical equal. There was no East team that emerged in that 3-year span that stood a chance against the Lakers, yet alone one that had a big man that could give Shaq any kind of serious problems. So while there were elite guards in those series like Reggie Miller, Allen Iverson, and Jason Kidd, Shaq was dominating a lot of people most of you probably struggle to name outside of an Oda Mutombo. I want to stress that I'm not discrediting Shaq in any way, but I'm really trying to nod to the fact that a prime Shaq would have been Finals MVP with anybody as his teammate. You put Michael Jordan, LeBron, Iverson, T-Mac, any great perimeter player you can name on these Laker teams, would any of them put up numbers like Shaq while playing on his team sharing the touches with him? No, they wouldn't, just like Kobe didn't. It wouldn't mean any of them were carried. Hell, they'd probably post amazing numbers the same way Kobe did, but they're not winning any Finals MVP trophies with a prime Shaq as a teammate. Oh, and one last note about the 02 Finals, because I've never seen anybody bring this up. This is where Kobe really started to solidify his clutch label. We remember a sweep in that series, but the scores were actually respectable in most of the games. Kobe came through with amazing fourth quarter performances when he scored 12 and 11 points at the end of games 3 and 4, but he also shot 63% in the fourth quarters for that entire series. So throughout this video, I mainly sold Kobe's side of the duo since that's the one that's been the most undersold in the last 13 years. This wasn't me saying that Kobe played a bigger part in their success or that he deserves the most credit. It was simply me showing how illogical it is to be throwing this narrative around that Kobe was carried for 3 championships. Look, Kobe was fortunate to play with the most dominant force of all time, and Shaq was fortunate to play with a kid that was determined to be like Mike. Their time together was rough, they didn't get along, but on the court they were a force that virtually nobody could deal with. It was hard enough to guard one of them alone, but to be wearing the same uniforms, they did what they were supposed to do to make that work. Shaq dominated whatever stood in his way, and Kobe held his own, occasionally saving the Lakers the few times that Shaq wasn't performing. So in conclusion, for the era that spawned 3 straight championships, 4 finals in 5 seasons, and the greatest playoff record of all time, Shaq needed Kobe, and Kobe needed Shaq. Nothing more, nothing less. The end. And that's all I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, I highly suggest you watch the one I made about Kobe Bryant and Shaq's rift, because that gives the entire backstory for how their beef started and how it ended. I figured this was a good time to make this video since we're talking about dominant playoff runs in the modern day anyway, so it's just kind of fit in with that. I hope you learned something today, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. So maybe you're one of the people who does think Kobe got carried by Shaq, and after watching this video, if you still disagree, I would love to see why in the comments, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to see that anyways. So if you enjoyed it, hit like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my videos. I'm Dom2K, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.